Yeah, let's go. Yeah, so
I'll remember to record this one too. So I'll resume here. So I'll just reintroduce you a bit.
yeah, please.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Very nice to have you here. And we're back again for another discussion on meditation with Brother Ben. And just to recap on a bit about Brother Ben, he's been studying graphic design, creative arts therapy, you've founded charities, you've worked with children with special needs, you've done work on stage, off stage, a lot of creative arts, music. I remember you back in our London days, you just have this amazing capacity to reach out to so many different people, and people gravitate to you. And I certainly did, because of your just gentleness, your openness, your flexibility, and you have a way of healing. And I think many people see that, and it's just wonderful. I think you have such an amazing gift, a warmth, a sunniness, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Massively, we're old friends since.
Privilege and pleasure. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So today I wanted to touch base on many people talk about the different styles of meditation. So I'm a yoga teacher, and I know that there are specific rooted styles of yoga, but then over time there's like a development of modified, adapted, different styles that come out. So I guess it could be a bit the same with meditation. People talk about now mindfulness meditation, spiritual meditation, focus meditation, movement meditation, mantra meditation, transcendental meditation, and then there's the progressive, the loving kindness, and now there's even a quoted kindfulness. What is your take on that? And can you talk a little bit about these styles, and how would somebody choose a style that would best serve their needs at that particular time? So of course people gravitate and evolve and probably move from one style to another depending on their needs. Can you talk a little bit about that? Different styles and how people choose?
Well, there are different aims and different purposes for different meditations, and some meditations are global, that they encompass kind of a great many things. So whether people choose their own or they go to a teacher to ask them is also a bit of a question there. Once you can get acquainted with a teacher who you learn to trust, their judgment, you can also ask them, what will work. So that's one thing. But generally, so you can get meditations that remedy a characteristic you have. So angry people, hateful people, irritable people, often loving kindness, for example, counters that. So let's start at the top of the list that you gave there. You gave a list of 7 meditation basic areas. So the first one you talked about was mindfulness. So when I talk about global, I mean the meditation that will encompass a great many things. Well, mindfulness is one of those, because within its scope comes the body, comes the feelings, comes perceptions, comes the mind states, comes all sensing as well. So mindfulness comes under various names. It's also important to know that what mindfulness is as well. Mindfulness is a governing quality of the mind which can sense regulation. So it can sense, am I concentrated now or am I not? Am I energetic now or am I not? So mindfulness is a form of governing awareness. It's also important to know that mindfulness alone is not enough to do the work of so-called mindfulness meditation. It has to be operated together with wisdom. Mindfulness catches hold of an aspect of experience, and then wisdom will start to see we should remove this, or we should maintain this. So for example, when the mindfulness goes, okay, what's really happening is I'm anxious, then the wisdom can go in and say, is that anxiety necessary or unnecessary? And then if it goes, it's unnecessary, okay, then chuck it away. You're just worrying about nothing. It doesn't matter, you're not fat, that's just, you're worrying about nothing. All right. Or another one, yeah, you're worried because there's termites in the roof. Yeah, let's work on that tomorrow. So let's put it aside, but yeah, it's a real thing. So mindfulness, it has this quality of, as I said, knowing, are you too energetic and too restless, or are you over concentrated and falling asleep because you're so calm that you're going to zonk out? So it balances those two. Those two are coupled, energy and calm and concentration. So you can have too much of either, but the ideal is to know them in balance. And the thing that knows them in balance is mindfulness. There's another couple that goes together that mindfulness knows, that is confidence and wisdom. Those go together as well. They need to be balanced. So faith or confidence is one aspect. So when it's really low, you've got loads of doubts, thousands of questions, can't trust anything, very suspicious. On the other side, and then in that time, loads of questions. And so we need to make sure that we're not sort of overconfident and over full of ourselves. And we need to know that the wisdom part of it there as well. So that's another thing that mindfulness can assess that and be aware of it. So those 5 factors: calm and concentration and calm and energy, and then those balance, and then faith and confidence, which is just one faculty, and the other one which is wisdom. So they need to be balanced like that. We need those to progress.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's the best description or best way of helping you to understand mindfulness that I've ever actually.
It's an overused term because people know it's commercialable, they know it's popular, they know it's credible, and it's an approach as well that is very departing from the past. Past therapies would ask you, so tell me about your childhood. That's where they would start. Whereas mindfulness is like, focus on your breathing, stay in the present moment, and observe your own experience. Nothing about your past, nothing about, analyzing your childhood or something. So it's a grounded and effective way to start with mindfulness. And with mindfulness, one system uses mental noting to bring up mindfulness. That's a very important thing, which is awareness of. So you actually see what is my mind holding at the moment? Well, it's fixated on looking at something, or then it's awareness of seeing. Or if it's fixating on a sound and saying, what is that really irritating noise? Well, it's fixating on hearing. So then it's in the awareness of hearing. So you can mentally note awareness of hearing. If you're then aware of the temperature, you go, wow, it's really lovely in here today. So what you're actually aware of is 2 things: the temperature, awareness of temperature, and then the loveliness, the pleasant feeling, awareness of pleasure. And then you can have a primary object like the breathing to establish on, to observe these other phenomena and come back. And that's mindfulness. So you're not fixating on the one thing and blocking everything out. That's more like focused meditation, where you zoom in and grip on one thing, and you grip on it, excluding everything else. So good mindfulness is able to observe the mind catching hold of, but also letting go of. And that's a very important thing, is the letting go part of it. And that's also very different to, say, for example, cognitive practices where you go into the mind and try to change the thinking, change the thoughts, or hypnotize in some way, sort of insert ideas with positive thinking, like with Louise Hay, that kind of positive affirmations. You're trying to push ideas into the mind. Mindfulness doesn't do that. It observes things as they are, but it knows they are wholesome or unwholesome. It knows a perception is just a perception. A sound made in the mind is just a sound. So awareness of hearing and so on like that. It's usually with a primary object like breathing or the rising and falling of the abdomen or of the nose. So there's usually a primary object, and then those secondary objects of the 6 sense doors are taken as also objects of mindfulness. And you can have mindfulness of walking meditation as well. Okay, so that's mindfulness. Probably ought to move on. That's one of the key ones, certainly in a Buddhist monk's training, the word is sati, which is mindfulness. When you start being able to still down and gain this mental sight, so you're actually able to watch things with the mind, then it starts to becoming called that you can see into causes and effects, see into and learn about the processes, which is more like psychotherapeutic knowledge. And then it can be called seeing into. And the Pali word for that, seeing into, pasana, vi, going through, vi, pasana. Some people have tried to sort of co-opt that title as a sort of franchise, but it's just meaning that you gain, even a cognitive therapist now will use the word insight, so that someone has higher awareness of what's going on within themselves and why, and how it's arising. So that's, heightened awareness. So if there is imagination, you know it's imagination. If there is fantasy, you know it's fantasy. If there's delusion, you become more aware that it's just a delusion, and you can also let go of it. So you can start to replace cravings with contentment, and irritation and hatred and dislike with tolerance, and then also unhealthy egoism with wisdom. So that's the aim, primary aim. So it's a transformative practice. It's very important. Tranquility practices like focused meditation, mantra, transcendental, even loving kindness, perhaps even progressive relaxation, they're temporary states. You know, it's like if you go to a relaxing massage, it's temporary. It's not really remedial. It's not remedying anything on a long-term basis, and you know it. It's just going to feel good for a while, but later on you go back and you've still got to, sort out the problems and everything. You're just going to be a bit more relaxed. So it's many of the meditations have that aim, and they know it. They're not really aimed at very long-term paradigm shifts, changes in big perceptions of your body-mind, experience. But mindfulness taken to its full extreme, if you like, it's really the wrong word. Its full goal is permanently transformative. It can really shift perceptions of so-called self and habits, cravings, hatreds and things like that, like prejudices, and can fully remove them on a permanent basis if it's done to the full extent. Okay, so we move on to next one. Next one. Well, right over time. Second one I said was spiritual. So to contrast spiritual, many meditations, for example, John Kabat-Zinn, he does mindfulness-based stress reduction. There's no attempt at involving spiritual dimensions in that meditation. It's really is daily life, secular world, putting up with stress in your daily business world. It's not really aimed at anything beyond that. But for example, some of the meditations in Asian practices, well, no, we shouldn't say only Asian, but in other practices as well, are aimed at, say, channeling invisible entities. So it starts involving realms that aren't seen. We're not now talking about very mundane. I meditate to improve my golf swing. We're not talking about that. We're talking about communicating with the dead, communicating with super beings that are transcendent, like angelic beings. You're talking about contacting ascended masters. With the spiritual realm, you're also talking about communicating with entities that have access to other realms, like deep memories of the universe and of the planet. So that's like those kind of meditations, as you can tell. So then they are they're using things like remote viewing. They're talking about listening to the words and the communications of devas. So devas, and then you're involving the fact that in the Buddhist cosmology, you have 31 realms, and the human realm is only one of them. So the fact that you're going to be getting faculties that can communicate and listen to and learn from, or even aim to get reborn in, or those other realms. So that all comes under this, the spiritual types of meditations. Yeah. So it involves cultivating very absorbed visualizations. By fixating on those, you cultivate great inner absorption onto the object. So you're hypnotizing yourself in a way, kind of onto an object that's visualized, making it incredibly real. So it can be considered dangerous in some senses, because you are then going into a form of induced psychosis. You're detaching from outer reality to get in touch with visualization. Sometimes those are spheres. There's a whole series of sphere visualizing meditations called kasina, and they tend to go from a densely constructed thing like a sphere made of stone, and then gradually get much more refined. So until it becomes like a hologram of colors, and then eventually light. Because what's said is that the entities that dwell in those higher realms, they do not have a physical sweating body. They have bodies made of light. So the frequency of their intelligence and their communications is on those frequencies. So you're going to have to raise your frequency. We're always looking at, wood, stone, food, people, flesh, water. That's what we're usually tuned to, the wavelength of those frequencies. So spiritual ones make you raise up your frequency until you are very comfortable with only perceiving the realm of light. It's called Abhasara realm. And then you've got more of a hope of being able to tune in and telepathically communicate with entities that dwell in those realms. Shall we move on? So there's that.
So, very quick question on that one.
Yeah.
Telepathically, so
Using mind, using thought. You don't, because you can't, because in order to speak in our realm, you have to have teeth, tongue, spit, and they don't. They just communicate by thought. They dwell and many of them can manifest things by thought alone. So, but they don't have an eternal existence in those realms. They gain their ability to get reborn there through practicing meditation. So, but the Buddha did warn that while those realms are extremely pleasant for the duration you're in them, once your credit expires, game over. You come down, and there's no telling that you will stop on the earth realm. You might go down into a hell realm. So he warned that you've got to be very careful. It's like constantly aiming to be rich. People do that on the assumption that once you get super rich, you get $1 billion, you're just going to live forever and everything's going to be wonderful. Well, it's not. Afterwards, it can run out, and then you can fall down into poverty and so on. So it's the same with spiritual wealth. Is that yes, there is rebirth in heavenly realms. You need a great deal of moral refinement to go higher up like that. You need a great deal of meditation refinement and a great deal of wisdom. And because there's many of those realms, some people will get they do a lifetime of being a nurse. They build schools. They practice prayer. So they will get reborn in a realm, because you meet many lovely people and you think, wow, they're so sweet, they're so pure. They gravitate up, and you meet some people who are gravitating down because they're so horrible. And the actions that they do are so driven by craving and hatred and jealousy and bitterness and ego. So they get drawn down. They lose and expire their credit. Better move on.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's good to touch on these, and
Yeah.
then of course other calls. What we can do is like really, we can take one of them and then really investigate further, and there'll be questions I'm sure that people will, So it's good. We'll cover kind of like skip the surface,
Yeah.
great explanations, and then we can of course go.
Well, many of these also do cross over a little bit. The next one is focused meditation. Focusing means that you take one single object and then you glue your attention on it forcibly, moment after moment after moment after moment after moment after moment after moment. The more moments that you're focused on one object, then that's called focused meditation. Usually the word in Buddha Dharma teachings is samatha, where it means one-pointed meditation, and you have one object, and so that single object. So several of the other ones that we're talking about, mantra, where you take one word like Om, or one word phrase, Om Mani Padme Hum, or you get given a personal mantra or sold it in the case of transcendental meditation, where they actually calculate your own personal one, and if you make a donation they'll give you it. That's the case this is used in many traditions, from Islam to Gnostic Christians to there's a whole, well, many of the Indian traditions also use these, and in Buddhism it's used with a Buddho. There's many of them, but you're taking basically one sound or one word. Often it's a seed syllable, and then they'll be involving other things, like the idea of seed syllables gets combined with chakras, which chakras aren't just a given. Not every school is teaching about chakras, but some of them do. And then they might mix the mantra together with a specific area of the body, and they'll say, oh, this mantra activates that chakra. But that's just because they say so, you don't have to accept it or use it. But that is a practice. So mantra is using a sound. The word mantra also means a circle which is all around. So it has the idea of concentric. Like there are gong meditations that use sound, the shimmering sound of gongs is used. But mantra is where you use a word or a sound, and then you use the vibration and the focusing of the attention on the vibration and the meaning of the word until that makes the thinking mind fall away. So that's mantra and transcendental. So focused is one of those versions. So you can focus really on a visual object or on a sound, or a little bit on a concentration of the two things. So whenever you're using heightened concentration and you are having an object which is right in front of you, say even like there are many of those ones that use specific hertz frequencies or binaural beats, and sometimes they'll mix something, and you can get those now, which they never used to be able to do in the past, on a screen. So you have to bear that in mind, that sometimes when they are using visualization, they would have used laptops if they could, or they would have used photos if they could. So they only had very crude, abilities to be able to brush paint things, but they would have done if they could. So, for example, in those days, often they would use an object like a circular disc of clay, but I will use a photo of one, and it just has exactly the same effect, or a crackling fire. That's meditation, is to focus on a crackling fire, or water, or air on clothing that's hanging on a wind, like blowing on the wind. To focus on that, and there's like I say, it's a bit limited time, but there's bound and unbound of these type of things. One is where you create a limited area, and then you focus in, like even you create a cloth with a circle cut into it, and you look at a fire through that, and then you focus on that circle. And then there's unbound. So you can look at bound water, which is almost like a droplet of water or in a glass, and then you focus on that. But you can also look at, so it's bound, but you can look at unbound, which is like going to the ocean, and then you just look at the ocean. So ocean is unbound. It's not in a container. So there's those different types. And then there's yeah, I can't really go into too much detail here, but there's an ascension of complexity of those. So there's going with a simple orb, a sphere, made of stone, fire, water, and then air. And then there's where you're going to start visualizing a north, south, east axis in just conceptually, right out to the horizon. And from there, that's also used in other meditations. But that's a practice, is to be able to create a north, a south, and an east axis on the horizon from where you are. So I'm in a room here with a wooden thing, but I should be able to consider that way back here somewhere is, south, and straight ahead through those walls is north, and east and west. And I should be able to hold those in my mind so that your mind then expands out of your building. And then you're going into the realm of unbounded space. And then what you should be able to do then is somewhat invisibilize or transparentize walls so that you can start to consider the world around you. So when you do that physically, it's something like an architectural program. That's what they actually do. If you get Google SketchUp, they'll have that ability to do it. And this is something that they were using in those times, is to do that. Then if you can do that enough, and you kind of forget about all of the physical things around you, you can start to go into the realm of infinite space, because the horizon is only about 8 miles away in every direction, I think it is. And then what you can see is the limit of the sky, but the limit of space is out beyond that. So once you can start to sort of reflect that, even down through the earth and out past the clouds and the sky and the mountains, there's space, then you're on a whole new wavelength already, and that is the realm of infinite space. So that's a way of expanding the mind. Back to the realm of infinity and the architectural one. When you're going out north, east, and west, that's just all you're really thinking about. There is like an architect, it's just buildings, buildings, roads, roads. You're not really thinking people. So the practice of loving kindness is usually done with a systematic north, east, west, south, and then the intermediate points of reflecting about certain categories of people in those directions. So you think like all the beautiful, wholesome beings in the northerly direction. So you tune into them and you consider like who would they be? People meditating, people praying, people doing kind actions, people who are protecting their child, or and you tune into that. And then you do it in the easterly direction, and then you do it in the southerly direction, and do it in the westerly direction. And so you do it with people who are very easy to transmit out towards. So you reflect that that's what you're doing, is sending out really pure, kind vibrations, that may all those beings be happy and free from suffering, and may they have no enmity, no ill will against any beings. So you do that, and you can, the extent of that can keep going. So you go to this neighborhood, but you can keep going and going and going and going and going across. Also, there's a practice of breaking down boundaries, is where you actually just keep going further and further. So I'm in the Philippines, but you would go up to Hong Kong, and then China, and then the North Pole, and then down to Canada. It's literally like that, is expanding it out. But that's the category. The first category I say would be like easy people, like high masters and pure people and people with affinity. And then you gradually go down the realms, both through the human realms, through the sort of grislier people who are difficult to send loving kindness to, and yeah, you know what I mean. People in prisons who've done horrible things and difficult to forgive. Like that. And then, but then there's also then going down from the human realm into the animal realm, and then the animal realm, spirit realm, and then the like further like that. So there's and then you can do all the beings in the oceans, like this. Well, you have to do it within the limit of what you can consider to be real for you. So there's that, and it's usually said that with loving kindness practice, which is the last one on the list there, but I'll cover another one, is that you should be very careful and not do people of the opposite gender when you're also starting off doing this, because then it can also turn into a sort of Valentine's Day card sort of thing. So you've got to be careful. It's just a human nature. So you just have to be realistic. But the way of doing it in the north, east and south and west is a way of being systematic and objective. Otherwise, the tendency is to just zoom in on your best friend and your best friend and your best friend, and then sort of drift into a story. So it's a way of being very systematic. And then there's also beings which are higher than you and beings which are lower than you. And this is also recognizing our role in the great, scheme of things, isn't it? That's the word. Your teachers, your teachers' teachers, and then sort of high pure beings who you recognize are very, very noble. The Mahatma Gandhis and the sort of Mother Teresas of the world sort of thing. And you start to send loving kindness up towards them. And then you recognize lower beings, like I said, who are difficult to forgive or who are an enemy or angering people, difficult to do. So that's loving kindness meditation. That's usually in Burma, for example, it's done at least once a day by the monastics, and they do it in the Pali language. It's very beautiful to hear as well. All right, so and the word for that is usually called metta. But I've told you there about the systematic one, which is I think it's called 108 objects, because it has a certain amount of realms and a certain amount of directions, including the higher and the intermediate ones. There's another one which is a loving kindness meditation, which is simply a chant, but it just goes through as a reminder for someone who's wanting to cultivate loving kindness, how they should behave, that they should be humble, that they should speak gently, they shouldn't rush around, they shouldn't have too many duties, they should treat everyone as a mother treats her child, calmly and lovingly, and it talks about it. It's more of a verses, and that one's called the Karaniya Metta Sutta. But metta is this quality of unconditional love, and that's the main aim, is to generate and cultivate and maintain that state of loving kindness, which is unconditional. Yeah, that's metta, or mitra. Metta is the main way it's used. So yeah, let's just recap. So mindfulness, that's sati. So there's a very famous thing called the Satipatthana Sutta. Patthana is a foundation, so you put your feet on it. So the mind is often scattered and jumping around. And when it's got a platform, it can anchor and be stable. So you can have mindfulness of the body, you can have mindfulness of the feelings, and you can have mindfulness of perceptions and mind states, and you can have mindfulness of things like those 5 that I said, where you've got mindfulness and it's looking at how much concentration and how much energy have I got. Someone might say, no, I'm really buzzy at the moment, I couldn't possibly meditate. So the thing that's saying that knows that they've got buzzy, is mindfulness. So, and then the thing that knows, the mindfulness knows, whoa, I'm getting insights I never got before. This is news. My mind feels bright. I'm onto something here. So that's when the investigation part of the mind and wisdom is cultivating well. And another one is the faith or the confidence. So these are called the 5 faculties. So when we say the 4th foundation, it has lots of these groupings that are very useful to know about, and they cause you to have a good reference in your meditation. There's a list of 32 of these. So that's called, so the first one is called mindfulness of the body. Second one is mindfulness of feelings. Third one is mindfulness of the mind, which is a bit general, general term. And the 4th one, mindfulness of spiritual laws, spiritual governing laws, Dhammanupassana. All right, so that's mindfulness. Spiritual is usually done by increasing the willpower on a single object, and through holding that and practicing it over and over and over and over again, the development of the willpower and with that kind of concentration gets people to be able to access light realm, visualizing it and maintaining concentration comfortably. Most people aren't comfortable at all with the idea of being only in light, because they're so comfortable with their wooden and metal and plastic objects and their food and things like that, but in order to get comfortable rebirth or maintain, communication in that realm, you have to be very comfortable with the disappearing and the non-attachment to all of those material objects, and you have to be comfortable with the realm of light and similar realms. There's not only one. There's, like I said, there's 32, and there's about 12 of them which have this angelic spiritual quality. But it's also a bit risky. That's not sort of something to be played with, as well. That's something that needs to be done under supervision from qualified and sensible. I've heard some teachers, and to me they don't sound sensible. They sound like a little bit reckless. They like playing with magic, mucking around with black magic and things like that. And so you have to be not reckless in practicing those ones. But on the other hand, I think other people are a bit too scared of them, and they miss the benefit. And many things that people do nowadays, like those graphic design and animation programs, use the same technology, but it's just used mentally instead of on a screen. But when they create environments in animation programs for a movie, like Kung Fu Panda or something, they're doing a very similar thing. They're manipulating and learning to hold an object and then focus in on it. That's quite similar, roughly. So I think people couldn't get too afraid of it when they realise it's like that. That's pretty tame. I think more people could benefit from those, but the benefits are somewhat temporary compared to mindfulness. Mindfulness practices can get permanent shifts in conduct and problems. Oh, there's one I didn't mention. Yeah, while we got time, which is there's actually two I didn't mention. That's movement meditation and progressive relaxation meditation. So let's talk about movement meditation. So that's quite a big topic because movement is a very general term, and for example, movement therapy. See, movement therapy and dance movement therapy, these are specific things that involve using usually sound and music, and often groups, and that's usually quite a bit different than most meditations, because most meditation teachers and meditation centers presume either stillness, you're sitting cross-legged on a cushion, or you're doing mindful movement, which is usually very slow. So there is also the two meanings here in a way. You've got walking meditation in traditional senses is usually something very slow, very contemplative, usually, not always. There are monks who race up and down quite quickly, and things in Zen that are done quite rapidly. But movement meditation, in the sense of there's movement therapy, but if it's using mindfulness as its basis, that's going to be quite different than if someone is doing a therapeutic orientation as their basic idea. So, for example, if someone's doing movement workshops and it's Jungian, they're going to be aiming to do certain things. Or if it's using Gestalt therapy, that's going to be aiming to do certain things. So it might be very confrontational. You might get the teacher go, get your mask off, or something like this. They are involving the theory in the orientation, say Gestalt therapy, which is aiming to remove masks and get down to the real inner person by ripping off their fake things. So the movements are all going to be about that. You might get the teacher like pushing someone into the corner of the room and then screaming at them face to face or something, like that. It's quite confrontational and shocking. But that will be considered a form of movement therapy. There's activity, there's role play, you've got lots of different things like that. Then you get things like biodanza or 5 rhythms, where the aim is to get you to access emotions that you wouldn't ordinarily access. And then the aim of that is to become a more whole being, because they have a theory of a whole self. So, for example, biodanza is very connected with Carl Jung theories, and they're theories. His theories were different than Freud's. So, someone who's a Freudian-based therapist but is using movement Mostly they don't. Mostly they lay on a bench, lay on a couch. So it's not really that. Carl Jung, much more artistic involved, but he had, like I say, he was aiming to do things like going on a journey, into the archetypes, down into the underworld. So as soon as you start talking like that, and there was, now you're a snake, now you're a hippo, like they will use active imagination, and then acting it out, actual embodying those theories. So those are all forms of movement therapy. Like I say, the Gabriel Roth's 5 rhythms, that's using specifically different rhythms, chaos, stillness, staccato, flowing, deliberately to sort of systematically move through different emotional mood states that you wouldn't normally have in your regular day. So, and therefore, they've got their ideas about how that is therapeutic. Yeah. So
I do remember the fire dance at the Barefoot Boogie in London in the 90s.
Barefoot Boogie was a place where people who were involved in those kind of workshops and practices, or teachers, usually went on Friday just to unwind, because it was alcohol free, and you met like-minded people. It was a holistic place for doing movement, and good for it, in that sense, I thought. Just you're drinking apple juice. That was the only drink was there, and a really weird range of musics, rather than the usual just oof, 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 sort of thing. Yeah, and you'd meet interesting people. So why not? That's good for the holistic practitioner.
Yeah, you'd have like bankers turning up in their suits and they'd be really shy and sort of, but they were there, and then after like 15 minutes, you'd see them loosening their tie, and then by the end of the evening, they were like really clearing the floor with some cool moves and totally expressing. It was really
movement therapy. Yeah, for the bankers. So yeah, so that's. I mean, movement therapy goes to many. You can work very deeply. There's authentic movement, where the idea is of an authentic self. So you're not supposed to be doing manufactured and superficial actions like in salsa. Salsa's a sort of, flamboyant form of choreography, so it's all numbers and it's all, artificial movements which have to be learned. So they're not really anything to do with your own healing or your own wounds. So authentic movement, so that's something altogether very different, which is not plastic. It's not putting on a shape or a cultural form. It's not like, like dancing, as in folk dancing, like Indian classical dancing or something like, or ballet or whatever. That's something looking for it's a very different aim in that sense. So yeah, movement meditations differ, but there are very many therapeutic orientations. So that depends what's meant by movement meditation. So someone who's trained in Rogerian therapy, Carl Rogers, it's all about unconditional love, everything. Nothing like Gestalt therapy. It's all about acceptance and quiet, just listening. So movement therapy done like that is all going to be it's all going to be softly, not like Fritjof Capra who formed Gestalt therapy, like, it was scared the hell out of you. But he'll go, oh yeah, no, good result. I scared the hell out of you. Go, get away. Well, you might be actually accessing deeper stuff, but other people don't need that. They need Rogerian because they've never been experienced a loving, unconditional mother or something. So what works for whom and how is. And sometimes there are other limitations. Like, I work with special needs kids, so they couldn't move very much at all. Not like the majority of people. So there can be other aspects that come into it. Progressive relaxation, just moving on to the last one that we'll cover. Progressive relaxation through the muscles of the body. So it's somewhat hypnotic. It's somewhat hypnotic, like hypnotherapy. It's often using visualization. You are a log in a swamp. The birds are chirping. You're sinking in the mud. And you'll gradually zonk on the floor, and that's down to suggestion, which will often get you into the right place. You surrender your faculties over to believe the visualization, and melt down. And when you melt down, some things do often arise that wouldn't otherwise. When you've switched off your thinking brain. And it's also somatic. But sometimes people do involve theories then, they'll say, oh yeah, you've got memories, locked in your body and they'll get released because So some of those things are nice ideas. Some of them are verifiable by science, some of them aren't, So, and some of it's just suggestion, which happens to work well. But I've come across various forms of those where, like, inner dance is one of them, where people are sort of talked into submission, it seems, by a sort of like hypnotic talk. And then they'll lay down, and then a sort of shaman will come along and just touch them in various places, and they're like, oh, I'm healed, So it's coming like laying on hands, in Christianity. It takes, a lot of it has belief and suggestion woven into it as well. So that's pretty much covering mindfulness, meditation, spiritual meditation, focused meditation, movement meditation, mantra and transcendental, which kind of encompass each other. Mantra encompasses transcendental. Progressive relaxation, and then loving kindness meditation. As much as we can do in 45 minutes, that's a sort of an outline of those, and to show the differences and the contrasts and the different aims and objectives of them a little bit, and a bit of an introduction.
I've learned so much already. I know I'm sure you can go really deep into each one of them, but I've learned so much already
Cool.
from what you've shared today. So that's really opened up so much, so many new channels for me to explore. I love that, absolutely. Just one little question.
Yeah.
For example, there'll be all different people doing different things in their lives,
Mm.
and of course their life situations change. How would somebody choose a meditation? Like, for example, would they need to define in themselves, like, oh, I'm stressed, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, so they would aim for something that's more slow orientated. If somebody's kind of too relaxed and kind of needs chirping up a bit, needs to define in their mind because everything feels hazy and they need to have more clarity, would they aim for more of a direct focus kind of meditation? How would people...
Yeah, it's a difficult one. The Buddha was one of the few people who could accurately diagnose and prescribe these. Even some of his most enlightened disciples couldn't do it. They would be working on trying to teach someone for 6 months, and then it just wasn't working. And they would go to the Buddha, and he would just flip their meditation. So no, take this and take that over there, and do this meditation with it, and it would work. So it's not an easy one. One of the things what I do tend to believe and see, though, is that if you do mindfulness meditation, which is completely neutral, that's across the board, that work for everyone. But if you listen to what's arising, because therefore you're not suppressing, you're not blocking, you're not, which is most of those all those other ones, spiritual focused movement, perhaps, mantra TM, progressive, relaxive, loving kindness, all of those come under the tranquility group, samatha, which is suppressant meditations. They all will suppress any problematic faculty. They won't really give you enlightenment in that sense. Mindfulness will. If there's something to know about, it will tend to surface, because you're not putting a lid on everything when you do mindfulness meditation. The opposite. You're allowing, you are allowing enough concentration, but you're allowing the rest of it to present and be observed without interference. And that's a rare condition. We're normally blocking, we're normally filling, we're normally jamming up, and occupying the mind. So when you do that, things will start to present. So you should then be prepared, mentally prepared, that you have your main practice, which I would recommend mindfulness, and then you supplement it with the other ones. And you can try the other ones. You try mindfulness supplemented with loving kindness. But if you're, example, a lust person, you can really find loving kindness hard, because it starts off great, And then you veer off onto a pornographic fantasy, and you go, oh, wait a minute, I was doing loving kindness. So not going to work, or so on. So that is an example of the way that that might not be the right one. There are meditations for people who have a lust faculty, which is to go look at anatomy, medical anatomy, and also to look at forensics, decaying bodies, corpses that are dragged out of a lake. That will turn you off. And then, thinking about the smells of the body, like the smells of the breath, cadaverous smell of the breath, rotten egg smell of the breath, old fish smell of the breath, that turns you off. So that's the right kind of meditation for someone with high lust problems, for example. But a qualified teacher knows those kind of things and can usually prescribe them. So, but they will also tend to arise within mindfulness meditation. So, for example, if the meditation which will boost you most is going to be contemplating death, the dying, the limit of life, and that the physical body that you've got will become a corpse and you'll exit it. So that will usually present in the vipassana, in the mindfulness meditation, in some way or other. You'll start to, even as you go around, you start, look, everything's decaying, everything's breaking, everything's going to smash up eventually. Like, oh, my body is as well. Look, my fingernails, they're all cracking. You'll get the insight. That is the way that vipassana works. The three main characteristics of life universally, which is that everything is impermanent, starts to just show up because you're not blocking it out with shopping and focusing on solid things and how permanent they are and how under control they are. You're allowing yourself to see experience without that vetting of the ego. So you start to see, whoa, everything does get old, doesn't it? And look at me, the teeth and everything, I'm getting old. You get more aware of it and more aware of it and more. So also that suffering side of life, and also that you can't control things. Those three characteristics come really impinging in. So through your defenses, through your occupations and so on. So then, depending on what shows up best for you, you can start to listen to it. But if you're not doing that, then you may not be getting enough wisdom in. So that can be, mindfulness will enhance your truth meditation, your truth perception. And the truth perception ultimately should be your guide that tells you which kind of interests that are good for you for the moment. And that transitions as well. It might be history to give you more depth, or it might be anatomy and corpses, or it might be, it depends. If you're deluded and too dreamy, doing the angelic meditations might not be a good idea. So it depends, like that. But we tend to not, as a beginner, as an apprentice or whatever, you tend to not make very good judgments about that. That's why it's good to associate with a teacher who can know you and then start to guide you.
Absolutely. That's really helpful. That's very, very helpful. Because that's often a question that I see people asking when they start to look at meditation. There are so many different forms, and that should be the blockage point. I'm like, so they end up not actually practicing because they're in this overwhelm of not knowing what's inside. So mindfulness is a start, and then finding what comes in and what you can.
Listening from the mindfulness, but not looking for it too hard. It should come along by itself in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That was absolutely
Okay. Yeah.
Awesome. I can't wait to listen to the recording.
Oh yeah, you remind me. I've been doing a screen recording too, so I'll put this off on and then try and upload to YouTube. So hopefully we'll have that too.
Absolutely. Well, I'm gonna just say a very big warm sunny thank you, because I personally learned so much from that great call, and I just want to listen to the recording again so I can recap.
I thought the silent input from Japan was really, really significant there. You're a master of that. He's taken years to get this silent. It's amazing.
Excellent.
The master of silence.
You learn a lot from silence.
Yeah, I thought I heard I thought I heard a frog. I thought I heard a frog in the background, like ribbit, ribbit. It might have been your lunch.
There's lots of frogs outside. Sure.
They were listening too. Good. All right. Well, there you go. Communicate with the frog. That's what we should call the series. Communicate with the frogs.
Being one with the frogs.
Become one with the frogs. Yeah.
I did have to save one today, actually, my cat.
Yeah, I heard.
She's hunting everything that moves at the moment. So we had to go and, it actually was a toad. We had to go and rescue the poor toad, which was enormous and was really slow. So it wasn't, it didn't have like the good start.
You never know. If you opened it up, probably had a cat inside it. Just getting its own back.
Exactly.
Past life. There's a past life story in there somewhere.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, just a thought.
Yeah.
Because Sunday I actually have to do some massage, but would you be able to do Saturday?
Yeah.
Should
No
we go for
problem.
Saturday?
Saturday, 6 o'clock. Here, 12 o'clock your time. Yep.
Yeah, that's
Fine.
great. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Very
very
welcome.
much.
Keep it going. You're doing great. Very good questions and good hosting.
Lovely. Thank you. Did you like the sunny background screen, the virtual screen?
Yeah, that's very good. Your caravan gets bigger every day. So no, I think it's wonderful. No, it does look very, very rustic.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
My friends call it the Hobbit house.
Yeah, that's right. See, Gandalf up there in the Hobbits mountains. Yeah, there you go. Thou shalt not pass. Actually, talking of hobbits, Colin, you look very hobbity down there. You should have one of those pipes, you know. In the Shire.
Actually,
You need to set.
I'm feeling so relaxed. I was in and out of sort of dozing in and out. But yeah.
You're communicating with the spiritual
To
realm.
make it very rustic looking.
It looks very zen. Looks very Japanese. What time is it in Japan?
Oh, it's 8 o'clock here.
8 o'clock. 1 hour ahead of me. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, thank you for joining in.
Mm.
And, have a lovely evening, both of you, and see you on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll make a note. Right, Saturday. We'll. Okay. You're welcome, Colin. Come in on Saturday if you want.
Okay.
In there, like. Be very nice to see you again.
Excellent.
Okay.
Nice to see you, Colin. Keep chilling. Keep zenning.
Oh yeah. I think I'm just going to go. I'm sleeping in my hammock now. I think I'm going to sleep all night
More relaxing that. That's
Deep peace.
now. Yeah.
Deep peace.
Okay then. Well, thank you for holding the session. It was good. Very
nice to see you. Brilliant. Be in touch, and I'll be in touch.
Okay.
And
Over and out. Yeah. Okay. Go forth and prosper.
You too.